we know by now that Kurt Schaefer experienced found his father right after his father had killed himself. And he carries that memory with him through his adult life. He has found his last living relative, Eva Schaefer, in Linden Grove, Illinois. And we've gone all the way through the novel with Kurt's experiences, having found a new family, having carried his baggage and gradually trying to overcome the effects of his father's suicide and his young dysfunctional life with his father and his stepmother. And right near the end of the novel, Kurt is ready in Madison, where he is teaching at the University of Wisconsin. He's ready to come down to Illinois to rejoin his new family. But he decides to take a nap first in his small apartment, and so he does. He lies down for a while, and when he wakes up, here's what happens to him. The only light in the room came from the window that faced the street. Someone was standing near the foot of the bed. It was a man, his face turned away, faintly silhouetted by the indirect glow of the streetlight outside, and a voice, a familiar one, speaking in accented French. "Réveille-toi," the man said. "Kurt, réveille-toi." Alarmed, Kurt started to sit up but fell back on one elbow. He couldn't decide which would be worse, to jump up and try to run downstairs to the street, or to stay and confront the intruder. It didn't seem important to him that the man knew his name and spoke to him in French. He was never sure whether he thought in French or English anyway. "Kurt, écoute," or did he say listen? "You must give it back," the man said. "You should never have kept it this long." "Give what back? How did you get in here?" Kurt said. He knew he had spoken out loud, but his voice seemed to come from somewhere else, like a recording. How could this man have found his way into this bedroom, of all places? It was on the second floor. There was no porch to climb up on. He knew the downstairs door was locked. "I can go anywhere you are, any place. That's my right. I'm your father. Don't you know me?" "No," Kurt said. "No, I can't see. I'm not sure." "If you love me, you could see me." The shadowed figure paced back and forth, impatiently, it seemed to Kurt. "I do love you. I did." Kurt began to sob like a child. I did. "Then give it back. Where is it?" his father shouted. "Give what back? I don't know what you want." His father stopped pacing and swung around to face Kurt. One side of his face was lighted by the window, the other was in shadow. "Bien alors," his father said. "All right, then. Look." He swung around again so that his entire face was in the light. Kurt could see a kind of murkiness, a reddish fog, on the other half of his face. Instinctively, he looked away, then forced himself to look back at his father. He thought he understood now. "Why are you asking me to give it back?" he asked. "I don't have it. You took it." "No," his father said. No. I would never have done that. And leave you with her?" It seemed to Kurt that his father was speaking German now, but perhaps he had been all along. "But you did. I saw you. I saw it." His father sighed, a strange thing, Kurt thought, for a man with half a face. It sounded almost like a whistle. He was certain he'd always remember that sound. "You still don't understand, do you, Schatz? It was Clara. She did it. She said she was going to put me out of my misery, like a dog. Bang! Ah! There I went." It seemed to Kurt like a hideous farce, like actors on a stage performing upside down and backwards. But there had been times over the years that he'd wondered if Clara had pulled the trigger and then thrown the gun into the pool of blood and brain matter. But no, he thought, no one had ever raised that question, that possibility. He had a blurred memory of Clara, summoned from her delivery route by a neighbor, he supposed, driving home, finding police and ambulance vehicles, and the nightmare in the bedroom. She screamed until they took her away. The police had questioned him briefly before before she arrived, then left him standing on the sidewalk. Clara had rushed past him, arriving and leaving without a word to him. Eventually a neighbor saw him and took him home across the street. Mutter used to say that, Kurt said now. She killed him, she'd say. She did it. I thought she meant Clara drove you to it. Clara liked to say I was crazy, but she knew I was not that crazy. She knew better. Why do you want it back then? Kurt asked again. I don't want it. I don't need it now. I don't want you to have it anymore. It's that simple. It's making a stain on you. Can't you see it? You must find it and give it back. If I find it, couldn't I just throw it away? Oh, I suppose so. What's the difference? But I don't know where it is, Kurt said. He could hear his voice begin to echo as his father moved toward the window. Where it is. Keep looking, his father said. You'll find it. It makes a stain. Give it back. Give it up. He was gone. The darkness in the room unveiled a misty whiteness outside the window. Kurt gets up, goes over and turns the lights on, and starts to cross the room. And he looks down, feeling some dampness under his feet. A thin skein of ice at the foot of his bed was just now melting into a puddle. So, of course, we don't know, and Kurt never knows, whether that was a dream or a ghost, but the effect was to shock him into the idea of giving it up. And he has to think, of course, and feel about what it is he's supposed to give up. He has another experience on the way home. He rushes out of the house, packs a few things, and gets into his car and starts down I-39. There's a severe snowstorm going on, a blizzard. And he gets stuck on I-39 in a line of cars. And for various reasons, he gets out of the car on the driver's side and nearly gets run over by a snowplow. And that also makes him not just think, but feel how precious life is and what he's going to do with the rest of his life. He does make it home, and he gets settled in with Aunt Eva, and he finds Sarah, and they go out, and they all have a meal together the next day. Excuse me. And during the blizzard, though, another animal emergency occurs, and Sky's husband, David, has to go out in the blizzard and meet a veterinary technician at the clinic and do an emergency surgery. Sky, left at home, knowing that David is at the clinic, went back to bed, and then early in the morning she wakes up. And this is the last passage I want to read to you, because I think it's a good way to end the book, or our experience of the book at this point. Sky woke up, turned to look at the bedside clock. 4:30. It was an hour too early to get up, but if she went back to sleep, she'd probably oversleep. She missed David, but enjoyed knowing he wasn't out in the storm. She turned back to look out the still dark window, then, surprised, propped herself up on one elbow. Had it really stopped snowing? She tucked her feet into her slippers and went to the window. She leaned closer to the glass, peering upward. She could see some stars, but the white brightness out there was too diffuse to be moonlight. The light seemed to come from the snow itself, as if it needed no other source. This is what silence looks like, she thought. The waiting silence, the listening silence. She wondered if anyone else was looking out a window somewhere, seeing this white light, watching the silence. She thought of the entire town, once a settler's haven on the prairie, streets widening over the years, rows of wooden storefronts, women in long skirts, the men with wide-brimmed hats, horses standing in dusty streets, hitched to wagons, waiting for their owners. The people watched the seasons pass just as we do. Their winters were just as white and violent as this one. And then in the spring, she thought, they'd have seen the fields in the edge of town, spreading their ribbed rows to the long, flat horizon. wind whipped in thunderstorms, undulating green avenues in summer, gold-topped, brace-rooted corn rustling and creaking in the long day's heat. It's the same now as it was then, she thought. People waking up, waiting for someone, working, watching the weather. In another hour, she thought, there'd be tracks out there. They'll start shoveling or blowing the snow off the sidewalks. In fact, she heard a village snowplow now, a few blocks away. The silence had been broken. The past century and a half, which had rested lightly on the snow as she stood there, had floated upward and disappeared into the silvery morning.